My name is Kerry Morris. I ran for mayor of the City of North Vancouver against the incumbent Darrell Mussatto in the November 15th, 2014 municipal elections. We're now roughly 8 months into this council's mandate. Much has changed in the city since the current council took office, and it seems time that we took stock of both the election and those changes, lest we forget what we were promised versus reality. In the opinion of virtually everyone who pays attention to municipal politics in this province, this past municipal election cycle was the dirtiest campaign fight in the history of municipal elections. It was most certainly the dirtiest campaign in the history of the City of North Vancouver. As a lifelong resident of the city, I have lived through numerous municipal elections, including the one in which my father ran for council and won, serving 3 years under Mayor Jack Loucks alongside fellow councillors Stella Jo Dean, Bill Bell, Rod Clark, Barbara Sharp, and John Braithwaite. While the names evoke many memories of political hardball, it can honestly be said that until this last 2014 election, no incumbent had stooped so low to retain office. The games began in earnest on July 22, 2014, when the city threatened the first of many legal actions against me. The first resulted from a mischaracterization of a press release which I had issued in relation to opening of my campaign office at Lonsdale and Esplanade. I retained lawyers who made it clear that I had done nothing wrong and would clearly win if the matters were tested in court. But it was a bad use of our resources, and it would also be a bad use of the public's resources. I was running on a platform of strong fiscal management. To me, it seemed wrong to pursue a wasteful legal battle just to prove a point. So I accepted the advice of my solicitors, and I issued what they described as a non-apology apology. The correspondence was drafted by my lawyer and delivered directly to the city's solicitors, Bullhauser. The city then threatened a second lawsuit only days later, accusing me of not meeting the terms of their first demand. But they had to eat crow when they discovered they were looking at old data resident in their own desktop computers. They had simply failed to refresh their computer connection with the internet. The next lawsuit was threatened in relation to my North Shore News ad dated October 8th, which the city once again sought to mischaracterize, accusing me of accusing them of acting illegally. As it was clear to me that the city's CAO had now taken a decision to cross over the line, becoming partisan, and support the incumbent by aggressively opposing my campaign using public funds, I decided it was time to draw a line in the sand, and I refused to make the apology the CAO once again demanded, or remove the article from my website. The city's CAO published an untruthful press release and distributed that article using the city's website. We got more aggressive and issued our own detailed press release titled CAO Gone Wild. Soon thereafter, the city's press release was pulled, and the matter seemed to miraculously vanish as an issue. The city then dropped all semblance of impartiality, approving Darrell's use of the sidewalk-mounted bike racks up and down Lonsdale, in which the mayor placed election signs at about 20 separate locations. When we protested this issue, Ms. Carla Graham, the city's clerk and chief elections officer, informed me that the mayor's use of these advertising locations had been approved by staff, despite the election sign policy. She then told us we could also use the bike stand advertising spaces if we wished. However, by the time she made this announcement, all the bike rack locations on Lonsdale had already been taken by the mayor and would not come free until the election was over. So we came up with a lawful workaround to combat what the majority of candidates believed was unlawful advertising activity by the mayor's campaign. We mounted signs on both sides of 22 bikes and on the handlebars and positioned those bikes in strategic locations up and down Lonsdale. Within a day, the next lawsuit was threatened, against me by the city. But in addition to the lawsuit threat, the city announced that if the bikes were not removed immediately, city staff would begin cutting off the bike locks and removing the bikes from each location themselves. This time I decided to go big fast. I brought in the lawyers once again, but this time we issued the threat. Cut off those bike locks and remove those bikes, and we'll have you in the BC Supreme Court for an injunction, cost recovery, damages, and special costs. Scary words in the legal business. I think we really rattled them because the city withdrew direct contact and stopped with the legal threats. Instead, we heard from the owner of the bike racks. He arrived at our office quite upset, but not upset with us. He told us that he had been summoned to the office of the city clerk and that she had instructed him to seize all our bikes on allegation we had abandoned them. He stood in my office in front of witnesses, mad as hell, and told us he had no advertising space that he could rent us until after the election. He asked me if we'd abandoned the bikes, and I responded, no, I had not. He then asked if I would agree to remove the bikes each night, then put them back out in the morning to help deal with the clerk's demands. I said, yes, I could do that. He said, thank you. You may continue to use the bike racks like everyone else. He then said, I've been put in the middle of this political disaster and I'm not happy about it. We never heard from the city on this matter again. What's interesting is that in addition to the bike rack signage infractions, the mayor and his slate also had signs located on the Spirit Trail at 2 locations near the Lonsdale Quay. And despite more than a dozen complaints from numerous people, it took over a week before these signs were eventually ordered removed by the city. They were subsequently taped on the side of the Quay building. The owner allowed this in an obvious show of support for the slate. In my case, and in the case of many other candidates, we were issued email notices by the clerk in regard to sign placement. When these arose, and we were often told that if we did not have the signs off the offending location within 2 or 3 hours, sometimes less, city staff would be sent out to remove the signs immediately and at our expense. Clearly, the mayor and his slate were being treated differently. The next foot to fall was the allegation that I was a convicted criminal with an impaired driving charge, as well as being homophobic. These accusations were delivered by fellow candidate George Pringle, who, like the mayor, was also being funded in part by developer Ani. What no one knew at the time, and I kick myself for not researching the issue sooner, was that George Pringle was not actually the source of all the dirt dropped on me. George was only the decoy mouthpiece for that dirt. The real source of that dirt was Darrell Mussatto's campaign manager and former North Shore News reporter, Benjamin Aldred. Aldred attended the provincial courthouse and was recorded by the registry as requesting and receiving a copy of my court records, including the records that showed the charges had been expunged. Copies of these records are also located on my website. The alleged homophobic email was pulled from the BC Supreme Court records by Aldred, but only after a law firm working for the city gave Aldred, directly or indirectly, precise instructions as to where in over 100,000 pages of documents that email could be found. Aldred called for the precise affidavit sworn by Douglas Higginson, which had been located and used in another corporate legal action involving Alcan, who were also represented by the same legal firm as the city, that firm being Bullhauser. Aldred paid $10 cash to the court registry to secure the email copies he wanted. Aldred then turned the documents over to George Pringle, who fulfilled his agreement with the mayor and handed them out at the Centennial Theatre mayoral debate and throughout the balance of the campaign. At one point, the mayor and his slate sat at a community meeting held at the Commerce Court building adjacent to the C-bus terminal. With the entire slate in attendance, they sat, listened, and participated as the most vile and knowingly false statements were made about me to the residents of that building. I know this because many of those residents were so upset about what happened, they contacted me to discuss the matter. For my part, I immediately and directly answered both these allegations. The documents disclosing the fact that I don't have a criminal record are available on my website. I also distributed a press release and video statement dealing with the allegation that I'm homophobic. What was interesting about the homophobic issue is that the mayor supported George in this endeavor. First, the mayor's campaign manager, Benjamin Aldred, apparently through contacts he had with an organization named SPIT, and through college contacts and his time as a news reporter, where he discovered friends at Extra and the Georgia Straight, he worked all those contacts to give the homophobic angle he had created, with George's help, momentum. Then the mayor himself got behind it, by way of a CTV interview that he gave several days later.
I was just shocked when I read it. And, I just couldn't believe what I was reading.
The incumbent mayor is slamming the language at a groundbreaking today. Hard to ignore the mudslinging now underway. But he's not the one who released it. That was done by fringe candidate George Pringle, who found it in court documents.
Is this mudslinging?
To a point.
And that's okay?
And it's mud that's stuck, so.
That interview gave the issue a further push, while at the same time falsely attempting to position the mayor as not being involved. I was given a pretty rough ride by both the Georgia Straight and CTV, and in my opinion they were not fair or balanced, and the issue was rigged by both organizations. Recently I learned why the Georgia Straight allowed me to be treated with such obvious bias. I was told in writing by the Straight's editor, Charlie Smith, that Darrell's soft treatment was related to the repayment of a debt owing to Darrell from when he supported the preservation of sidewalk paper boxes throughout the city of North Vancouver. This involved the Georgia Straight's newspaper boxes as well as other newspaper boxes. Some years ago, Rod Clark apparently opposed those street-side newspaper boxes remaining in place, and when Charlie saw me as being aligned with Clark, he opposed me for personal interest reasons. These facts are all documented in a series of emails written and sent to me by Charlie Smith himself. In April of this year, in a series of email exchanges, Charlie Smith agreed to correct the biased treatment meted out to me by way of a news story on this matter. But of late, Charlie has refused to respond to me by email on this issue or on the matter of gaming in the city, which he also claimed would become the subsequent subject of a Georgia Straight story. I have known Charlie Smith for an awful long time, and in my opinion, he is a good reporter. However, his actions in this matter were not up to the standard his profession demands. When the mayor's campaign floated the allegations that I was homophobic, that's when the race got really interesting. People who were offended by the Slate's conduct in making these accusations quickly made their way to my door. First off the mark was former Mayor Barb Sharp, who committed in writing various facts in relation to the wrongful conduct of Darrell in matters regarding both bullying and homophobia. Sharp wrote an email in which she described an incident involving then councillor Darrell Mussatto. It seems that one day, while Mayor Sharp was sitting in her office, Darrell stormed in demanding she fire the city's parks manager. In making this demand, she alleges Darrell used a series of extremely derogatory and homophobic slurs in relation to that parks manager's sexuality. Barb documented all of these facts in an email, which she then sent to Bill Bell, and Bill later delivered a copy of that email to me. It seems that Mayor Darrell's comments about me to CTV were akin to the pot calling the kettle black. And there were many, many more allegations involving everything from women to plane trips, from flipping condos to flying in private jets to trips to the World Cup. The allegations were many. Instead, we took a decision to stick to the issues of immediate importance to the community and leave the dirt to the mayor's campaign. But what we didn't know or understand until after the election was over is the issue that caused us the greatest damage and in the end cost us the election. The issue? Phone banks. The mayor ran 3 separate phone banks, one on East 1st Street from a premises provided by Darwin Construction and operated under the watchful management of Benjamin Aldred. This operation was staffed by rank-and-file NDP members, many of whom we now know and can list by name. Many of these same workers are now engaged for the party in the upcoming federal campaign. The second phone bank was staffed, operated, and funded by CUPE and located in Burnaby. The third phone bank, which was only recently discovered due to a spectacular cross-examination of Tom Nellis by Councillor Pam Bookham, was funded, staffed, and operated by Playtime Gaming, the same Playtime Gaming that now wants to open a casino in North Vancouver City.
You made contributions during the municipal election to campaigns of 4 members of this council. Did you at the time have discussions about the potential for gaming on the North Shore and specifically in the City of North Vancouver?
I don't think that I could say that we had any discussions regarding gaming, and we didn't provide any kind of cash contributions to any campaign. We provided some work people, in lieu of cash.
Sorry, you did what?
We provided some people that worked on a bit of a phone bank.
Just in case you've not heard about Playtime Gaming, this is an organization which has been labeled by many in the labor movement as a union buster. They have a dismal record in the area of labor relations, including a record of decertifying unionized operations, and where decertification looks to be failing, termination of employees who obstruct such actions. Playtime has LRB decisions registered in the courts which have compelled them to rehire staff who were wrongfully let go because they were obstructing those decertifications. Then on election day, we learned about what had actually been going on at City Hall throughout the advanced polling periods. The most egregious issue of all came to light. A city staff member who works in the library was discovered to be standing in the 14th Street City Hall upper foyer area near the stairs, greeting voters who arrived for advanced polling, quietly offering them a slip of paper containing a list of slate candidates' names for whom he told them they should vote. This act was a clear breach of law, and in my opinion, could not have gone unnoticed by City Hall staff. I had a resident and campaign supporter arrive at my office, and in a very distressed condition, she explained to me that when she went to vote the Friday before the election, she was stopped by that city employee and handed a slip of paper containing the names of the mayor and his slate. She then gave me that slip of paper. It was, to say the least, upsetting. I called the city clerk immediately, told her I was coming up to City Hall right now and why. When I arrived at City Hall and handed Carla the slip of paper on which the mayor and his slate were named, she was not alone. Also present was Dwight, the city's long-service security officer. Despite knowing exactly what happened and exactly who did it, the city chose to take no action. The city has subsequently confirmed it will not investigate this matter. I have subsequently seen that individual meet repeatedly with Councillor Keating after Monday night council meetings, and on one occasion, I listened as he recited the help he now needed and the many things he had done to help Councillor Keating and the slate, and so now he required their support in return. On this point as well, the city has refused to investigate. During the election period, I caught wind of a potable water contamination issue involving a water main replacement at 21st and Lonsdale, where the city had reactivated a new freshwater drinking pipe, putting that new pipe into service without first cleaning and flushing that pipe in accordance with Vancouver Coastal Health's drinking water standards. We terminated that employee because he did the right things on all our behalves. That's not the city my father worked at. That is how a bully behaves. This whole matter is certainly not a proud moment in our history. Our loss is now the district's gain, and their residents can take some comfort in the fact their drinking water safety has another good man looking after it. The city worker who refused to reactivate the pipe was terminated. I am aware of this because I have been copied on some of the letters issued by the city in which that employee was twice now threatened with further legal action after being fired on claims brought by the city that he had provided me with information which I then disclosed through my website. I am aware that Mr. Barnes stood his ground on these occasions and that he has refused to back away from this fight. For the record, I have written to the city more than once, confirming that I received the information in my possession through a Vancouver Coastal Health FOI request. These documents are all available on my website. About the same time as the potable water incident was revealed, I also learned that the city had suffered a financial loss associated with a water meter billing error at Lionsgate Hospital. I wrote to the city and asked for the documents by way of a formal FOI request. Initially, they stalled production and subsequently withheld the documents. So after the election, I made an FOI request on Vancouver Coastal Health. I asked them to produce all documents in relation to a water meter billing error at Lionsgate Hospital. These documents were released to me on April 24th, 2015, and I presented these documents to Council 3 days later. The FOI document released by Vancouver Coastal Health confirmed the city did indeed suffer an initial loss of $692,000 through negotiations, and after consideration for an overpayment credit owing to Vancouver Coastal Health, they agreed to a repayment plan allowing the city to recover $357,000. This leaves the city with a $363,000 loss. This should have been where the story ended, but it's not. The CAO weighed in, alleging no loss.
Mr. Tolston?
Thank you, that Your Worship. Your Worship, staff don't, the policy or the practice is that we don't want to say anything when that speakers are here, but I want to assure the public of the citizens that the city in the water system has suffered no losses.
The result of this allegation set a series of problems in play that have easily cost the city $100,000 in additional legal expenses and may ultimately result in fines and penalties.
Because people have got to know whether or not their president is a crook. Well, I'm not a crook.
You see, you can't lawfully allege a loss, get half the money back, and then say you suffered no loss at all. It's just not that easy. If you didn't actually suffer a loss, then you've used the allegation of a loss to defraud the other party. The city is now going to claim that in fact they had been overbilling Vancouver Coastal Health for years, and after consideration for this fact, they really didn't suffer any loss. But if that's true, why did they enter into a shared loss agreement? The FOI documents produced by Vancouver Coastal Health disclose that while they believe they had been overbilled during the period from 2002 through to 2009, it was so long ago that it would be unlawful to recover monies from this period, and there was no data to support the claim that an overbilling had in fact occurred. So how is the city now able to make this claim? And did they admit this overbilling liability to Vancouver Coastal Health at the time of the settlement agreement? Well, the answer is no. They have, in my opinion, made up this entire cover story to camouflage the fact they lied to residents and got caught. As I said to Council, Nixon didn't lose the presidency due to the break-in. He lost the presidency due to the cover-up.
So I want to assure the citizens here and to Council that everything is in order. We have not suffered losses, and that is the fact.
Bullshit. We had no overbilling debt to repay anyone. If we hadn't screwed up the water meter billing, we'd be ahead $363,000. And any story we tell ourselves that we've suffered no loss is simply designed to get Mr. Tolston out from between a rock and a hard place. The issue now involves an ongoing investigation by the Institute of Chartered Accountants, the Auditor General of British Columbia, and Vancouver Coastal Health. But we've suffered in another way as well. In an effort to cover all this chicanery up and keep it hidden from the prying eyes of taxpayers, we've agreed to pay the CAO's legal expense. That could equal $100,000. It would appear that we have also agreed to pay any fines which staff might become subject to, which is why we had to race through additional measures during the Tuesday night council meeting held this past July 7th.
Councillor Clark?
I would like this deferred till full council.
Is there a seconder? I do believe there's consequences for. Is there a pressing issue, Mr. Tolston, for this?
That if something happens in the interim before it's dealt with, There is no protection beyond court proceedings.
However, I've been at the table for 18 years, and it's never been a concern, and I'm only asking for 1 week between now and when we have a full council.
For those who support deferral, those in favor? Opposed? It's defeated, 4-2.
And it is believed that we may even have authorized the CAO to sue residents, characterizing the filing of a proactive legal action where he deems there exists a threat to staff. In essence, he'll be able to sue us if we question his actions. Now that's democracy. In addition to all these crazy events, we have deferred the rebuild of Harry Jerome for at least 10 years. This is despite the fact we've pledged to have it shovel-ready before William Griffin was completed. It is believed we have purchased the Telus land at 8th and Lonsdale. A new 25-meter swimming pool is being designed for this location, along with residential accommodations. This may eventually replace the pool at Harry Jerome. We've upzoned all of the Moodyville lands, and we'll end up with massive density in these neighborhoods. And despite the comments from the slate, the 30-year redevelopment of this area of the city will likely be in full reconstruction within 30 months, depending on the global fallout from Greece and China. We sold the Goodings density from Parklands. I'll bet, like me, you didn't even know that Parklands possessed density. Well, apparently they do. And we have sold that density to the Goodings to use in construction of the single most dense building in the city, to begin construction shortly at 161 East Keith Road. We've banked an amazing $48 million of savings in the past 24 months, yet taxpayers have just experienced the single largest tax increase in the municipality's history. The average single-family homeowner saw taxes increase by 8% this year alone, bringing the overall combined change in taxes since Darrell took office to an amount well in excess of 60%. And when all these facts and many more have come to light, the solution posed by the slate to quell dissension has been to attempt to limit freedom of speech during weekly council meetings by shutting down the public input period, which is really the only way that residents can effectively explain their competing and unpopular opinions to council. So I guess it is apropos that I draw your attention to our setting. When the Second World War ended, approximately 80 million people had directly and/or indirectly given up their lives to defend the democratic principles we hold so dear yet take for granted, and thereby place at risk. A word to the wise. These slate guys and gals will take away from you your freedoms and privileges the second you drop your guard. So be careful and keep your eyes on the city. It needs to be watched like a hawk, lest they sneak up with more losses, tax increases, development projects, school sales, lies, 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 like claiming that our rate of growth is only 1%, when in fact it is 3%, the highest of all lower mainland municipalities. You might recall all our growth plans are tied to increases in bus service that may never come, leaving us mired in endless traffic and gridlock. That bus referendum, which has now failed, means we don't have a transportation solution, and unless the Mayor's Council and TransLink were in fact lying to us during the last campaign, the existing service levels will soon decline sharply. I am reminded of a statement the Mayor himself made when commenting on the impact of the no vote in the plebiscite. He said, "We're in trouble. One of the options may be no more growth. It may be stopping the change, no more rezoning." Well, this is exactly the situation we find ourselves in right now, and the Mayor needs to remember his own words and heed them. As taxpayers, you need to be vigilant about what is going on at City Council for your own personal health and safety. If you don't, you may wake up one morning just like all 75 renter families living in the Mountain Court property located behind Lynn Valley Mall did, getting handed a check, shown the door, and told not to let the door hit them in the ass on the way out. Be vigilant, lest you become the next casualty of our local municipal government. My name is Kerry Morris, and I'm running to be your next mayor in the 2018 municipal elections. Thank you.